Hey, can I get your attention? Please. Thank you. I want to welcome Mike Franken. Apparently no kin to L.
Well, don't say that. Frankens, there's just kind of a few of us.
Oh, is that
so
right?
if you go down the lineage of the Frankens, about 4 grandfathers back, we're the same generation. He went on one side in the old country and he went on the other. So we're all kind of related, all of us Frankens. It's he's okay being, but here's the story of the Frankens. I used to be in uniform and I used to be on the Hill and I was Chief of Legislative Affairs. People would know him, but they would see my name tag, oops, on this side. So when we would walk and we would get a kick out of this, he's, of course, I have better hair, but he's taller than me, not really. And they would know him, but see my name tag and have that pause. And we used to laugh about it. So okay.
So I want to welcome him, and we met him, 6 months ago or so, and we thought it'd be worth other people seeing him. And I guess I've got a whole list of things I could go on and on about, but avoiding a plethora of platitudes.
All right,
I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, I'm going to try not to turn my back. So my back on.
We're fine.
So,
We like your back.
so,
As a matter of fact, we're glad you're back.
so moving on from that, this is kind of like when I was in high school basketball. Unfortunately, I had twin sisters, and I was a sophomore and they were seniors, and they were cheerleaders, and unfortunately would have to cheer for me, and they never wanted to cheer for me. So, I mean, I feel like these are my sisters back here kind of cheering for me. So this is redemption from my high school days. Okay, so my name's Michael Franken. I am a rather unique candidate for the U.S. Senate throughout the country as a senior military officer who chose to do this at this stage of life. But I'm from straight west of here, about 2.5, 3 hours, hard up against the Rock River, South Dakota, just on the other side of the hills. Sioux County, went to the public high school in Sioux Center, Iowa, youngest of 9 kids. Dad had a building about 3 times this size right here, and he repaired farm implements coming back from World War II. Married the good-looking woman in the county who was a one-room schoolhouse teacher who actually went to college, went to Decorah and also Westmar. I was a smarty in the family. 9 kids, I was the last. In college, I joined the Navy on a whim, at the urging of my brother versus the other choices in life, going to medical school and the like. All of us kids were compelled to do well in school thanks to Mom. And typical life on the farm, as a farmhand, as a welder, my dad's machine shop, certified welder, those of you that work with your hands, by the time of 16. When I went to my first ship in the Navy, I was still the best welder in the ship, which was much chagrin to my chief petty officers who worked for me. But worked 3 years in a hog kill plant, worked as a machinist and all sorts of jobs growing up, as a law firm engineer and as a math tutor. Joined the Navy, had a good career, ship captain, battle group captain of 24 ships and 4 submarines, a lot of time in the Persian Gulf, a lot of time in a combat theater, in a battle group setting, but also veered off and was a ground force commander in Africa twice, and spent a lot of time in northern Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the like, because that's what the country did after 9/11, and a lot of time in Washington, D.C. 3 tours in legislative affairs, was tapped to work for Ted Kennedy early on in 1996, part of his staff as the first military person ever to do that. And that was an interesting experience, working for the Lion of the Senate on how to get things done across the aisle, working with people like Orrin Hatch and Pat Roberts and a lot of others of varying belief systems and constituencies to actually get things done. And it's infinitely doable, and it was a great lesson on how to do that. And also how to affect policy change for the benefit of future generations, which I think Ted was pretty good at. Ultimately, as Chief of Legislative Affairs for the Department of the Navy and Marine Corps in the Obama administration, so I worked in Republican and Democratic administrations through the years on Capitol Hill. But a lot of policy and other business and a lot of strategy work and some think tank work. Very fortunate career. When the election came up in 16, I decided to do something else. I'm a decisive individual. You weigh things, know things, and do things. Early on, when I was a planner for the Navy for the invasion of Iraq in the Bush administration, I was the one person at a table of about this many people sitting around a table deciding what to do. I was the junior person at the table, and I said, "We're making a mistake. Let's not do this." The belli, the reason for doing this is not there. We are violating, and we're not thinking this through. I was overruled, but I hold to that type of decision making that is prescient, and it's what we should do. And we need some of these decisions in the future as well as we address our debt and a few other things. So, pleased to get out of the Navy after I requested retirement. Got out in late 17. After the 18 election, was very curious that we were going to perhaps not win the Senate and that the president was going to get reelected. So I thought I'd do something about that and reestablish my residency in the state of Iowa. Looked in the mirror long and hard about, do I really want to do this? This is not an easy choice. Got my wife's permission and got a broad swath of supporters who said, you know what, you should do this, you need to do this, the country needs to do this, Iowa will be happy with this, and made that choice, and here we are. Came in late, but I'm okay with that. My platform centers upon climate change, how to address it from an agriculture perspective, comprehensive health care, much like I was a beneficiary of for 40 years, mental, dental, preventive health care, everybody, and how we do that, that's another matter that we can discuss. And lastly, to address the great divide that we had generated in our country as a result mostly of special interest, some greed associated with that, where a small sliver of society has a tendency to benefit from the society writ large wrongly. And that's a big divider, and it also separates the parties in this nation. That's where expertise kind of in Washington, D.C., working, knowing how things get passed, how things get written, and what the second and third order effects of legislation is. I am very pleased to do this, and I'm happy to answer some questions as you wish, and any clarifications on what brought me here. I live in Sioux City, Iowa now. Bought a house downtown. It's my ancestral home, and I'm just tickled pink. And I go back there from being on these trips on the road for a little bit of sanctity, about 2 days a week, maybe 1 day a week. Depends on what she lets me do. So anything you so desire, I'm happy to address as best I can.
Domestic affairs, anything in particular?
Well, in the nation, there's a lot. I mean, the third rail that no one talks about, which if we had 18-year-olds sitting in here, they would say, how much is the debt going to be when I get my first job? And that's a really good question they ought to be asking. Because as the baby boomers, which I'm part of, as we age out and there's a gulf in the available workers, we start getting on this untippy scale, combined with the infrastructure that we need to address, combined with the inefficiencies associated with our healthcare system, combined with this disparity in income where we just don't have people providing to the revenue stream like we need to, and those that should be aren't. We've got a debt problem. And at exactly the wrong time, when we should be addressing it, we're not. It's actually getting worse. This is where big decisions need to be made, and we need to be visionary, what's best for our kids. And no one talks about this because since about 2010, since the Obama Budget Control Act was implemented and ultimately set aside with successive administrations, we've been adding to the problem. And when we've got a raging economy in some areas, when we've got low employment for other reasons, people have multiple jobs, that's true, it's true. She does, she's a student. She works 35 hours a week in 2 different jobs. That's typical, it's what I did in college as well. But it's necessary today. The difference is when I was in college, I paid for my college and my first house with my jobs. She can't do that, she's just surviving, I would expect. We've got to address this. We have a wage issue, we have a healthcare issue, and we've got a debt problem. They all come into play. And we've got a climate issue. The good news is, as a nation, we can do this. We might get some better leadership, though. That may come in handy.
What kinds of things would you support that would address the debt?
We should repeal 80% of the Trump tax cut. We should lift the cap
Yes.
on Social Security. I mean, that's just a no-brainer. That's that's irrefutable, frankly.
Excuse me, who put that cap in place? It's been in there a long time, hasn't it? Maybe you don't.
Aaron, do you know when that was placed? When the 138 cap? So it's moved. We'll research. I do not know. It was put in there. You know, we talked about special interest. I guarantee it. There is a crumb line, a Trump line going to every one of those little passages. Every one of those integers in a bill, I guarantee there was a progeny to it. There always is. And that's why somebody who makes $300,000 is paying a lower rate than someone who's an electrician down the road, who's a very successful electrician. There's a disparity, and it's wrong. And that's why we have, 40% of Iowa is the working poor. I do something interesting. I think interesting. It's interesting to me. I've got kind of a closed life. I go to a different place to get my hair cut every 2 weeks. And it doesn't take long. And I don't have to be particular. I mean, I can go to a sheep shear and do just fine. So it leaves a lot of time for conversation. And the conversation becomes, and the person, the shearer, will tell you anything. Anything from when the last time their child was to the dentist, last time they changed the oil in their car, whether they've got a washer and dryer at home, whether they've got a home, whether they rent, whether they own, healthcare, anything. I've never had them demur on a conversation, ever. And they're happy to talk. And you learn a lot about what that layer of society, what life is like. And I'm not talking, I don't go to, some fancy place. I drive by a stop line. And you learn that generally healthcare, I've only met one person who had paid healthcare. One. Paid for the employer. The rest is all a pickup game or none. Usually they've got something looking out after their kids. Most of them are single parents. Most of their disposable income goes to expressly kids things associated with school. And most of them do their shopping at Walmart. And most of them go on vacations, which amounts to a drive someplace and a stay at somebody else's house. That's life for them.
How do you see the pathway for universal health care? Or how do you envision
So universal as in health care for everyone? Or a single payer system? What is it? Okay.
What is it?
I think that in the state of Iowa, so I've lived on 4 continents. I've had operations on 3 continents, 4 continents. Doctor states. We have good health care in America. The problem is it's inordinately expensive, and there's an accessibility issue, and there's a huge efficiency issue, as in poor efficiency. The German system, for instance, what's an overnight hospital stay in a German hospital? Just like the United States, single person, the orderly, the nurse waking you up every 2 hours, take your vitals. What's that cost for an overnight in a German civilian hospital? Anybody know? In the Marin Hospital in Stuttgart, it's $242 a night. Or, I'm sorry, euro, which is about, at the time it was about $258 a night. A vein reconstruction surgery on my leg was €1,500. I would expect in the United States the bill for that surgery would be something north of $60,000. And this is without any insurance. This is just cut them a check, here you go, thank you very much. And out the door. The surgeon who did my surgery, the vascular surgeon, did his residency at Rice University. He was an expert. He was as good as any American doctor, if not better. The hospital was perfect. It's fine. That's an aspirational goal. It's where Germany is. It's where many other hospitals are. It's where we all should be. But there was no quibbling about the bill. I don't hear in overseas people complaining like we do here. Every coffee shop, every bar is about healthcare access, who pays, how do you pay, what's the copay, etc. It's an issue everywhere. So to answer your question, what do you do about universal health care? I think we need to go all in on the Affordable Care Act and see and iteratively fix the inefficiencies associated with it and see where that sets us. Ultimately, I think we ought to have Medicare placed on the exchange and a public and private option. I don't exactly know, but there are plenty of studies out here that address a plethora of options. The short of it is, we shouldn't have life expectancy going down in America like it is. We shouldn't have the cost of pharmaceuticals as high as they are. We shouldn't be paying more for insulin here, I mean, we know the whole story, than they do elsewhere. And we need to help the 30 million Americans that don't have health coverage. And because we kind of need them to be contributing to the society, and many of them are not, principally because of health care.
And how do you help them?
Well, through implementing all aspects of the Affordable Care Act. It's the only plan that we were headed towards adoption that I think answers those questions. It doesn't do it cleanly, but at least it's a solution, and it put people on the path to coverage. I don't know what else there is that helps out in that regard.
So when you say all options, does that include the requirement to have insurance?
I think you should have some form of coverage. Because the problem is, the 40-year-old who's healthy. I haven't been to a doctor since I got out of the military in 2017. But I pay into a plan. I wouldn't necessarily have to have that plan because I don't feel like I need to go to a doctor. But I do so for the off chance that something happens, but also to keep my family covered. They're healthy too, generally speaking. And, but it's to help my fellow man. And I'm okay with it. I'm absolutely okay with it. I'm privileged. I have extra income, and life has been good for us. I don't have any income now, actually, but I'm okay with that. And yeah, I think everybody ought to have coverage. And what kind of coverage? Varying degrees, I think is their choice. But here's the problem when you don't have coverage. If we're going to complain about rural health care, let's say Dow, Iowa, 500 people. Should they have a clinic?
No.
No. What's the nearest town to Dow?
Belmont.
Belmont. And that's what, 1,200 people?
No, Belmont is probably
2,000.
2,000. Okay. So should
They have a
Belmont have a hospital?
They have a hospital.
I wonder if it's solid. The short of it is this: if you want to put a clinic, a PA, a nurse practitioner, 2 assistants in a clinic, and be open 10 hours a day to service a town which the business plan says in a 30-mile radius that we can make a living here, you better have coverage for people. Otherwise, when she walks in with a broken ankle, she can't pay. And therefore your business plan doesn't hold water, because 30% of the people that walk in, including our migrant workers, can't pay. You either need to knock down the inefficiencies associated with healthcare, and you need to have some identifiable means for a business plan to work so that a organization can put a clinic in some of these small towns. Otherwise, you're gonna have coverage that's gonna be hugely scattered. And what I'm getting from hospital administrators in the state now are their hospitals at the first time are no longer in the black. Why? Some of it has to do with mental health in the state. When they have a patient come in, there's no bed for them, so they've got to put them up. There's no compensation for that, because most of these people do not have insurance. This is a problem.
Or we have to take them 300 miles away to a hospital.
After a week,
Yeah.
or you put them in the Huska, which is short for a holding pen for people who are emotionally, at this time, unstable, off their meds. So, and you know what I'm talking about, it's funny, because immediately if you have this conversation in a Republican environment, it's like, well, it's socialized medicine. Okay, call it what you want. But I don't know of another plan other than to discard that segment of society that A, can't be covered, and B, doesn't think they need to until they really need to. Sure.
I think people forget the cost of not having it as well. You were saying unemployment, but these people are sick, and they're not working, and they're in the hospital, absorbing resources and things. So we're not avoiding the cost.
It's
We're
just-
simply trying to
Well-
make them more efficient. If they could get preventative care, if they could see the doctor during the day as opposed to at the emergency.
All right.
I mean,
Here's an interesting thing. A couple of vets that are in this room. Do you know the veterans live longer than non-veterans? Life expectancy? Why is that? Because at one stage of their lives, we were all class 1 dental, meaning our teeth got fixed. And we were told, you have to keep your teeth good, and every 6 months you went and had your teeth checked out. And you learned that skill craft for the rest of your life. Or at least you got you on a path. You may have gone off, but at one stage you were there. That's the largest determinant, not exercise, not the fact that you got into a physical place, but the fact that you had, at a moment of your time, dental care. And consequently, we work longer in life as well, even though many of us have a pension, because we're healthier, and we pay taxes more. So the second and third order effects, the long game, the long pass is stay active, stay healthy, stay contributing.
and that's good for the economy.
It's good for everybody.
Yeah, and so it's not an expense, we're saving money.
You know, I'm a big believer in, okay, this is solution A, what are the second and third order effects? This is a consequence of spending many years in think tanks, or as collateral duty to think tanks. We kind of think through these things. It's interesting, and the numbers lie, but also tell stories. Questions, ma'am?
I have a question, it has to do with the education part, because everybody, we're hearing how they want to pay everybody's education in college off.
Yeah.
I like where all that money's coming from, because it's like the highest debt, I believe, even above credit cards in the
Yep.
United States. Not feasible in that sense, but the government, a lot of them borrow money from the government at 6, 7, 8% interest.
Inordinately high.
Back when I did, barely any interest. And I was able to pay it all off in a
Yep.
number of years, I mean, very few years. Is that feasible to get back to where kids, because most kids don't mind, and it gives them the responsibility to pay their money back, they have interest, in other words, they borrow money, you gotta pay a little more. It's a good learning lesson, but not at the rate they're doing, because now they can't even get their own
Yeah,
places.
so, I think so the question was, paying off student loans. Where's the wisdom in that, and are we doing a disservice to the youth of America by doing so? Even with the knowledge that it's higher than all, like automobile loans in the United States combined. Credit cards. So a couple of things. When I was a student, I worked as a bartender in a hog kill plant, as a welder, as a bouncer, as a math tutor, law firm engineer, etc. And twice the IRS audited me in college. Twice. How can you be making so much money as a student? Different wage scale back then. Back then, working in a hog kill plant, I made more money there than my father did, working as a machinist. You know, you can't do that today. Working as a law firm as an engineer, that was big money as a college student. You can't do that today. All those wages have been depressed. The minimum wage today was designed for a family of 3 to live in frugal elegance on one wage, 40-hour work week. That's true. There's not a single county in the United States where one person with small or minuscule needs can live by themselves on minimum wage.
You can't pay rent.
You can't live. The numbers don't work. You're starving. That's a whole separate another matter. Regarding paying off student loans, you can't do that. You just can't do that. I know people say you must do that. You can't. There's too much bad decision making associated with those loans that you can't ask your neighbors to pay for your bad decision making. Any more than you should for other bad decision making, paying too much for whatever. But I do believe that charging a interest rate at 6 or 7% for your loan is ridiculous. I think we ought to double or triple the Pell Grants out there. And then we ought to talk about national service. Not as mandatory, and not as Pete Buttigieg says, 250 people. I talked to him about this. No, we're talking about 3 million people, Pete. And we want a whole array of jobs. This addresses your healthcare issue to many, because this gives kids healthcare early on, gets them into a program, gets them paying in, get them involved in a TSP equivalent, a 401k equivalent, early on, 18 years old, 24 years old, working, planting trees, working in inner city schools, going into the military, whatever it may be, a host of jobs. And then we just can't say I wish in this world. Life is more complex than that. You gotta see how you're gonna pay for this. So I told Pete Buttigieg, you're gonna pay for it. The seed money that we pay, $18 billion or something to hire military folks, recruit military person, that goes into this program. because that builds the strength of the youth of tomorrow. And we don't need the numbers that we have in the military anyway, 2 million people. We don't need that. That's the Department of Offense. We don't need that. We can do vastly less money associated with that, put it into a national service program, and let people help pay. Let's work on rural health care, paying for rural child care. Pay a person $15 an hour or more. Pay what you would a teacher, what we used to pay teachers when they were upper middle class income, to watch the next generation and care for that next generation. Make mandatory pre-K, pay for it as a nation. And let's not make college so doggone expensive. Let's look at the efficacy of what it costs per credit hour and what that's really valued at. And let's make sure the student knows that if you want to do chemical engineering, what those credit hours cost versus something else. Where that dividing line is, so that something has a return on your investment. And let's expand. We shouldn't be talking about college. We should be talking about trade schools. We should be talking about giving back to communities as a way to learn. I think, here's another thing, the great divide in our country amongst our youth. If you went around here, most of the high school kids would probably be Republicans. Why? They're born in that. That's what's on the TV station, that's what's on the newspapers. It's that kind of sensibility. You move them away and suddenly you get all sorts of different ideas. Not bad ideas, different ideas, a wider perspective. That's where I came. I was apolitical growing up. A broad perspective, working for Ted Kennedy. I never saw his horns, never did. Didn't have a pointed tail either. He gave me huge trust. I worked for George Bush, the nicest guy in the world. They're just people who make sometimes good decisions, sometimes not so good decisions. They're not ideologues. Worked for the Obama administration. Mostly good decisions, not all good. It's not always so clean. But paying for people's school, that's just not a winning solution in my book. Man.
Data point. Social Security, 1935 under FDR. Cap was 3,000 in 1937. That's when they started the cap. And the
Oh, you
average
looked that up?
income, yes.
And then slowly went up?
Yes. The average income was $1,180 a year when they put on the cap of 3,000.
I see. So 3 times the income. So it's probably, so it's lagged that a little bit. But there's really, the rationale for a cap is that you're not, back when taxes were kind of a new thing during the Roosevelt era, you didn't want to bedraggle the upper incomes. I think we might want to release that now. Just expecting.
I have a question on immigration. Yes. That seems to be.
Hold on, ma'am.
Am I first?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Well, President Kennedy had a Peace Corps.
Yes,
Yeah.
still do. I have a niece there.
I think we need to push something like that for our kids, because a lot of the kids today don't know how to work because they're always doing this. And I think they need to know how to take a little discipline and do some work.
Well,
And get
this
paid at the
is
same time, just like that.
this is the generation that grew up in the 90s, really. And I saw this because I taught classes at various colleges, Naval Academy, for instance. And I asked a class of 30 Naval Academy midshipmen. They're generally valedictorians of their high school class. They generally played college or high school sports. They played an instrument. They know an education. I mean, they're valedictorian caliber. How many of them had a job before they went into college? 4. 4. When I said, okay, mowing your dad's lawn, working in your dad's law firm, they don't count. I'm talking about working back there, mowing somebody else's lawn for dollars, delivering newspapers. I'm talking about a job. 4. So what we've created, it's not their problem. It's our, this is what society created. The first generation who comes into adulthood having never perspired in the art of work. Sure. And so be it. Not like I, wasn't baling hay. I'm not talking about walking through 8 feet of snow on the way to school both ways. I'm just saying this is what happened. And life changes. I think bigger than doing this is the interpersonal communication that doesn't happen today. I do think that's a worldwide issue, but I do also think that it's a great way, and I don't have a solution for that, but I just want young adults to get out and experience a broader perspective. And my mom used to say, healthy birds flee the nest. And it's a good thing. Ultimately, they need to come back. We need to work on the quality of life here in Iowa to entice them to come back, and the jobs. The biggest thing is quality of life. Great infrastructure, great opportunities, great community, senses of community, great options.
Clean water.
I had a sister and her husband. He's a doctor. She was a psychologist. They moved from Atlanta to Okoboji, Iowa, Spirit Lake, when their first kid got into middle school, because they wanted a small town experience. They were very happy they did that. They had options in life. I would like people to do that. I'm glad I came back as well.
Well, if you win, we're glad you came back. We're glad.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah.
I have a short comment about that. Our kids were in the valedictorian at that top of the class. And as parents, we considered that as a job, was to
Do well in school.
do well in school, participate in things, so. And so mowing the yard and so on
Was their life.
was their
Right.
contribution,
Yeah.
so. I understand that, but there are kids out there that are doing everything
Yeah.
good. It's small town.
Everybody's raised a little bit differently. We're lucky in small town Iowa that there are jobs available for kids. In bigger cities, that's really not the case.
Our kids were.
Man,
Okay, with immigration, there's 2 things people know me, doorknob, was addressed, and this was, people want to know with immigration, obviously, our country is increasing in population, people don't realize it, but it is. With immigration coming in, there's 2 issues that was brought up, and can this be done? People said there was a time people could come out from Mexico, work, they'd get a work pass, and they would work, they would contribute money, they got taxed, etc. Yes, they sent money back there for their families, but they were working under a legal system of
yeah.
Can that be redone? And then secondly, and this was something I thought was really interesting, being military. A lot of people that say Mexicans, that's the majority of here, we hear people complaining about this beautiful wall. I just love that wall. A lot of the Mexicans that want to come to this country with their families, their kids, their wives, family, would happily, from what I've heard, join our military, get paid just like anybody else. Their families, after let's say 8 years, whatever, you could be legal citizen. Then, you get your medical, you get your pay in that. We would have one of the strongest militaries in the world, because given that opportunity, majority would jump on it and be happy to fight for us if we had to, whatever, simply because they were given opportunity they would never be able to have with the ability to have things. Is either one of those things doable when it comes to immigration?
So, workers, mostly Mexicans, Central Americans, etc., Hispanics, coming across the border with work visas, and then also serving in the nation, military. So yes, that work visa program is alive and well, and there's various levels of H1 visas for expertise, skilled areas. The Trump administration lowered all those numbers. I mean, I think it's 35,000 or something this year. It should be somewhere in the neighborhood, well over 1 million. Well over 1 million. Matter of fact, there's a large manufacturer in Pella, Vermeer, who were in the White House the other day, part of a delegation, clamoring for more people. Mostly skilled blue-collar work. And I talked to a manager of a machine works in Cedar Rapids the other day. The average worker in his plant has 27 years of service to him. They're not union, but he pays high wages, great benefits, and boom, they stay. His problem, I look at my workload, and I work by my employees, and I try to go up, and I was like, I can't. I don't have enough workers. So we talked about, well, what is Sioux City? What about other places in the state where you can build and capitalize on the technical education? He says, I'm game on. I have a business plan. I could build anywhere I'm assured to get the workers. The problem is the workers come out and are immediately snatched up. Oftentimes go to other states. So he needs to go a higher wage scale. He can do that. They do good work. So that program does exist. It just doesn't exist in a larger scale. So what happens overseas, our visa program officers are overworked. And they're hugely chastised. I spent a lot of time with State Department colleagues. I worked for the State Department in a couple of different capacities previously. When they let somebody through a visa work program who perhaps had something happen to them, or their birth certificate is not quite right, if it even existed at all, they get called on the carpet. We should double, triple, quadruple the number of visa officers we have in our embassies. It's cheap, it's easy, and we will be the beneficiary. Regarding getting temporary citizens to serve in our military, we do that today. The United States has hired, quote, quote, mercenaries since our inception. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Hessians? Oh, yes. Frenchmen? We even hired Frenchmen. So, Franken is French and Dutch. We do it today. Matter of fact, when I was a ship captain back in the late 90s, I had 17 first languages. Everybody spoke English, but it was the second language for maybe 30 members of the crew. So they spoke tribal languages from Africa, a lot of Spanish, Russian. I had Russians on board, Ukrainians, etc., who came over here on visas and joined our military. They didn't have security clearances, but by George, they were really good sailors. Really good. Because they had a decent school growing up in Ukraine and Kazakhstan, etc. We have that program now. We could do more. And paths to citizenship, absolutely. We swore in citizens every year in our ship. It's a big deal. We can do more.
Yeah, but
It's a
you
great
don't know about it. because
I know. We don't advertise it. Plus, the Trump administration has killed that program in many respects as well. These domestic programs that this president did This is fixable. The debt's hard. It's the international programs that are hard. It's the international relations which we've damaged that become really difficult to fix.
What a fascinating background you have. Would love to hear more about it, but I don't know that that's within the purview of today. Thank you for your position and sticking up for that about the Iraq War. I don't know, again, that fits in the purview of today. How did so much of the military get that wrong, including from the top, about going to the Iraq War?
I'll tell you the story if you want. Yeah.
Okay, well, yes, but I also, two other things, wanted to ask you about term limits. Our political system is very broken. Term limits seems like that may be an important piece for helping, one step of helping make that system. But also with your background, I think two other questions. Sorry, but talking about mercenaries reminds me, it seems to me we're making mercenaries out of our military going into Saudi Arabia. And with that background, maybe I don't understand that, and so I thought you might address that. But also, sounds like, sorry.
No.
But, again, with your background, sounds like you would have some understanding. Could we have the Department of Defense Department, and Homeland Security and all this other thing. What about a Department of Peace that's working towards more diplomacy and strategic thinking that does not involve always military thinking, that would also be kind of a pushback on that
Right.
militarization of our foreign policy? If you can address any of that.
Do you know-
Your background, maybe.
Do you know John Isaacs? Do you know John Isaacs? Have you heard of John Isaacs? So he's president of Council for Livable World.
Okay.
I spoke to him yesterday, matter of fact, on this topic. I've been I started out with, I was the nuclear warfare officer in my first 2 ships. Not much about nukes, I don't know, and all the other aspects of nuclear warfare. I also know how to find nukes and get rid of weapons of mass destruction. Having penned the Weapons of Mass Destruction Maritime and Air Interdiction XOR and the cross-border XORs, executive orders for the nation in the Bush administration, but worked early on in the 90s finding loose nukes, et cetera, in Kazakhstan and former Russian republics, east of the Urals, cooperative threat reduction issues, very much engaged on this. John Isaac discussion yesterday for how to make more peace in the world. We've already got an organization for peace. It's called the State Department. Now, you got to kind of look out, because behind every ill-advised military endeavor is an encouraging diplomat. It's true. We call them my ambassador friends. We call them liberal warmongers. There is such a thing. You gotta look out. You gotta look out for the person who has never seen combat in their lives, but have this boyhood fascination in doing it. Notice I said boyhood, not a girlhood. It's almost exclusively a guy issue. Sorry guys, it is. You don't have to pile on. That's piling on. Uncalled for. Violation. We haven't. We just have, we have learned wrongly, going back for many generations, that the first step is the military. Grenada. Do I need to say any more? Grenada. Beirut. Panama. Since 9/11, we've had 11 named operations. From, it's true, Operation Enduring Freedom, Philippines. Did you know that was a thing? We had major operations in the Philippines. I've been involved in it. Libya twice. Syria, of course, not so good. Iraq, Somalia, twice I've owned Somalia, twice I've owned Yemen. Been not owned, but been involved, had forces assigned that were involved in those areas of the world. We wrongly step forward with military solutions when military solutions are the last thing we ought to do. We have a problem in that regard. We truly do. I'm not a peacenik, not at all, not by any stretch of the imagination, but of those 11 operations, I've been involved in 9 of them. That's a lot. You can't kill your way out of these problems. It just doesn't work. Regime change is so yesterday. Just stop it. It just doesn't work. And it really won't work in a place like Iran. My biggest fear with this administration internationally is an ill-advised adventure in Iran. I'm pretty well vested in that area of the world. That would be our Gallipoli. Truly, our Gallipoli. Sorry not to be able to talk to you. Can you hear me okay?
Does it all come back to the money machine? You have to do this in order to keep all that money coming into the defense to justify because we need this.
So I just spattered around on your questions. I don't know how well I did in that regard. We can talk afterwards. But so is the defense industrial complex a force and function to our choices? To a degree, yes. Through advertisements, through who sits on boards, who has cross-pollinated in the decision-making, who goes from one billet to the other. Look who's in defense today and where they came from. I don't see any social studies teachers. I don't see any physicists who are working soil dynamics or the principles of concrete leading a defense organization. Ma'am?
Go ahead. I just wanted to say that I want to be in the room when you debate Joni Ernst.
Your handlers tell me that you need to be moving along. You've got other.
How are we doing with our coffees? I'll chat until we're done with our coffees. For a little bit.
Refills.
I have a question that,
Let me talk to this one. One second, sir.
okay,
Please,
sure.
sir. So there's an element of that. I think the bigger issue, though, is a hegemonic thoughts that we have as Americans. That this becomes our deal. This becomes our business. We know how to fix this. Step aside, everybody. We kind of have an issue with that. And a lot of stuff doesn't get the newspapers. But I remember having discussions with the Secretary with the National Security Advisor on country X, in continent X, Y, saying, just do that. Well, what do you mean, just do that? Then what? For how long? At what force level? How much do you want to spend? How long do you want to spend it? Here's a tough one. What's the rules of engagement? Who do I shoot and why? And what do I tell the folks on the ground? And where is it in the rule of armed conflict? Where's the imminence of this? What's the consequences of doing nothing? Perfect example is Burundi. I can think of 50 examples. Burundi. Running gun battles in the streets, election issues, minor Hutu Tutsi issue, as you recall, in '95, genocide issues. Franken, do something. What would you have us do? Stop the killing. I'm not gonna ask you why, I'm gonna ask you how. And then under what precept? What's the banner? What's the supporting organization? Don't give me this, we're Americans, we need to do this. Give me, we need to do this, and what's the foundation to build it on? Because bad ideas never get better with time. They just don't. And you don't formulate a better solution as time goes on. It doesn't work. The invasion of Iraq's a mistake, it doesn't get better with time. Burundi, we decided to put an outrageous price associated with our involvement. And outrageous meaning, what's the cost, guys? Okay, multiply it times 3. Oh, NSC, this is the price. Ooh, that's kind of high. Yeah, it's going to be bad. Politically, it's going to be bad in the United States when we spend this much money. Plus, it's only temporary. I'm going to make sure you know it's only for a month. Only for a month. And then we're rolling out. And we're going to go public with what each succeeding month costs. We are going to, you're not going to tell us, we're going to tell the world that. Because you know what, this is a bad idea, you're going to send, people are going to die. Kids from Peoria are going to die. Kids from Garner are going to die. And I haven't gotten the banner right yet. I'm not so sure why we're doing this. Guess what? We did nothing. We sent some diplomats, we did something. We sent some aid in. We promised them that we were going to work on some medical care and that we would do some other projects and we would mediate. And has anybody heard of conflict in Burundi? That was 5 years ago. Burundi is just Jim Dandy today.
Did we follow through on those promises?
Did we? Yes, we did. Thank you for asking. Absolutely. It's called a POA, a Plan of Action and Milestones. And you get ticked off as you go. And it only costs, like $27 million or something like that. It was nothing. It was nothing in the grander scheme of things, and you save people's lives versus taking people's lives. That's a benefit too. Sir.
Real quick, why the Democratic Party is seeking to crown Teresa Greenfield as the candidate to vote for? Why you versus all the other candidates that are running as the Democratic?
Ooh, that's a rather into the nucleus discussion.
without really bashing about why.
Oh yeah. So I'm not here to bash anybody. So the question is, why me versus the other 4 candidates?
Right.
So let's just talk sweepingly. When's the last time a statewide person in the Democratic Party been elected who's from Polk County? Does anybody know? Rob Ray. You were still in high school. So, we're kind of swinging against the current there. I offer a different perspective, a broader perspective. I'm the science person. I'm the kind of worldly person. I'm from rural Iowa, and I think we kind of want to be from rural Iowa, or we at least want to have those underpinnings. Here's what I really learned about living worldwide and working with Iowans my entire life, and Minnesotans and others, New Yorkers. There's a direct correlation between Iowa values and good governance. The sinewy connections are right there. Use your values that you were born with. And Iowa's a great place, and they translate. I've got good underpinnings in that, and I see what the consequences of poor governance do. I'm not so sure that we want to send somebody from Washington to Washington who doesn't have experience in the legislative processes. I don't want to cut down my competitors. We're all friends. I have experience in Washington, D.C., well over a decade. Legislative side, executive side, and others. I have service in my history. More than anybody. It's the most senior military officer to ever do this. Let alone State Department, etc. I think that helps provide you a more broad perspective, because I'm not in this for me. I don't need this job. I'm not doing this for my job. I'm doing this because I'm putting constraints placed upon what I think is going to be our next president potentially.
Public service? Good grief, I thought that word had gone out of back.
No, it's actually okay. You're not going to win this election with the candidates that we have anointed. And I told Washington, D.C. this over and over again. Because the three things that Joni used to get elected: rural Iowa, she's from Red Oak. When Red Oak gets a function, when the women's book club in Red Oak are having a get-together, they call me. Because I actually probably read the book. And I can talk about whatever they want to read about. So, military service. She had military service. Hers isn't like mine. Okay, it's a different area. And the whole pig thing, which shot her ahead. Now, pigs, adoring animals. I've been stepped on. I've been bowled over by them, but I've also butchered them.
Oh.
So from the snouty end to the curly end, there's not much about a pig I don't know. And from the lugging and to the stick pen, to the chitlin table, to the head table, to the kill floor, the rendering plant, I've done it all. So take those three strengths of yours and let's address the lack of special interest. I don't have any special interest supporting me whatsoever. The party doesn't even own me. And there's somebody who the party owns. I guarantee you that. So Joni Ernst got elected by being party to special interest. The Democrats are getting ready to do something very similar. But it won't be me.